Hi, everyone. This is exciting, and I have to admit I'm a little nervous, which is so weird because I'm in the classroom every day. I just did this big 2-hour lecture on mass incarceration and race, and I didn't break a sweat right now. I'm just like, whoa, amongst my peers, right? And this is such an easier topic. We Are First Generation project is a result of, I think we're waiting for our next slide. Yeah, well, that's me too. I'm a first generation college graduate. That's the first thing you should know. I actually attended University of Washington, Tacoma in my undergrad and my graduate program. I have 20 years experience with the institution. These are my people. You can't see, it's a little shady, but that's my daughter, Malia, my son, Noah, and my husband, Mike. I don't have a picture of my dog, but she's adorable. Her name is Lola. She was a showgirl. So the history of the work group. Student Success Task Force last year, up till winter quarter this year, a number of work groups were assigned with specific tasks. We were charged with researching high impact practices for first gen students specifically and how that's tied to retention. Okay, now the 20 seconds is like too much, right? This is great. I'm talking really fast. And what we learned, that our high impact practices are fantastic, but they're not necessarily tailored to first gen specifically, right? That wasn't an explicit design, and that's okay, but it was important to note. And that we also learned from our research for UW specifically that being first generation is not a significant indicator for attrition, right? So it really, and what we also learned looking at the research, this is a team of us just getting into databases and some of the work in journals of higher ed, was that retention research tends to imply who's the problem. And we named 3 characteristics of those types of students, if you will, that they're underrepresented, they're first gen, and they're economically disadvantaged, right? And we struggled with that and decided to shift gears with the charge of the work group and decided that we wanted to ask different questions about campus perception. We found that many people had very vague definitions about what it means to be first gen, and that sometimes our support of first generation students, or our support on campus doesn't necessarily match the need, right? So we decided to then go a little deeper and ask, well, what's really the problem? And this is where the sociology comes out for me. We talked about campus climate and culture, an issue of stigma in particular, and silence and invisibility for staff and faculty who are first gen, not just our students, and then institutional response. Some of the common narratives that we came across in discussion and research, including work here on campus, is that students are perceived as underprepared, underperforming, affirmative action admits, despite I-200 way back in the 1990s, that they're immature and they lack support at home. Does that sound familiar? Right. Okay. So what we know is that this is a result of deficit thinking, and as much as I shouldn't be text heavy, I have to read this quote. Deficit thinking justifies existing social conditions by identifying the problem of inequality is located within, right, the student, rather than pressing upon disenfranchised communities. So the goal then becomes that we have to fix the student, right? And that's somewhat problematic because the message is, it says that you're not enough, okay? So the impact of deficit thinking is an overemphasis on growth mindset and grit research, and there's a lot of controversy around this from the actual original researchers themselves who've tried to make an adjustment to the application. And the second is a paradox of over-efforting, right? And every time I talk to my students about this, they tear up, okay, because it relates. This is some of the common student response too, right? Deficit thinking. Avoidance of challenge, imposter syndrome, which we see a lot of here, and our faculty and staff also experience this, right, but rarely admit it. So, so much for timing, right? Our recommendations from the work group, just briefly: abandon deficit thinking, embrace asset thinking. We decided to support our student leaders who generated this fantastic system of outreach for the year, more than we could ever pull off, and then a pilot project of increasing awareness on campus, right? So visibility and shaping the culture. Asset thinking is gravy. That's the best way to put it. When I looked up the word asset in the dictionary, gravy's right there. And for any of you folks who are my people, you know that gravy matters, right? And so I love that. We value the whole student, and you are enough, right? The biscuit and the gravy, right? The good stuff. So let me, I have handouts which will give you some details about asset versus deficit thinking. Some of the research on community cultural wealth, also features traits that many of our students bring to campus, and this is what we incorporated into our posters, our webpage, and the beauty is that when we started collecting student narratives and stories about what it means to be first gen, you can actually identify all 6 of these traits and more, and it's really exciting, and students start to see it too, right? This is an example of our student leadership. They've, to date, right, from fall to present, I know, have hosted 19 events on campus, right? Really, really impressive, and have built a network and really elevated the narrative about what it means to be first generation in a very prideful way. How we know it's working, this is one of our student stories, and her quote, "At UW, being a first gen college student is normalized, and I do not face the same stigma that I did in high school." So we consider that an indicator of success. So you didn't know this, but you have homework. Right, so yeah, so if we could bring up the web page just really quickly. I may not have enough, but if you want a handout, please write me and I'll send you a better version without typos and misformats. So our web page is here. Our goal is to grow this. If you click on one of the tiles, the images, you get an inspirational quote for other folks, other students, and you can click here and read David's whole story. In the handout on the second page, the back page, there's a list of the 6 cultural traits, community wealth or community capacity, with definitions. Your homework later tonight when you have some free time is to go and read some of these stories and see if you can identify some of the traits that are implied in the personal narratives. Get your Kleenex out because you'll cry and you'll laugh. They're amazing. They're amazing. So thank you. Ricardo. Hello.
So I think my question is kind of centered around, so like UW is overwhelmingly first gen already, right?
Yeah, UW, over 50-60% of our students identify as first generation,
right.
Those that know what it means. And I think we have a lot of students who don't
right.
know and
so
might qualify.
Yeah. Right? So I think the stigma is different because you're surrounded by people who are like you already. Mm-hmm. So then my question is, what is the next steps to, because the thought process from the faculty is still pervasive, right? Because that's higher education in general. Mm-hmm. And so then what is the next steps to get faculty out of that thinking? Because I have now found community very easily, and with these stories it's helped. But the faculty still view me in very specific ways because I'm first gen, right?
So we need to come out. Right, as first-gen faculty and staff. This is cultural work, but it also means institutional reform. We need policy and practice, and we need our leaders integrating narratives of first-gen, right, into their work and when they address larger groups. It's workshops like this for sure, but it's a shift, right? It's a shift in thinking. And the good news is that, especially for the faculty in the room, there's tremendous research in this area, right? So this is not just value added, it's not feel good, and this is where a lot of other institutions are moving. Another way of thinking about it too is that, and this was a big part of our discussion in the work group, is that we tend to think about first gen as sort of an umbrella, right? And then students and their other group identities, right, or social statuses seem to sort of like fall underneath that umbrella. And we actually have talked about flipping that because while we have a lot of first gen, right, again, meaning their guardians or parents did not complete a 4-year degree, we have some students who that's not true, or their parents did, or guardians, but their experiences by way of race and class, gender, nationality and ability, and so on, still pose both social barriers, cultural barriers, right, and challenges in institutional systems, especially higher ed. For example, some of our international students where their parents earn the equivalent of doctoral degrees in their home country are here now working as janitors, right? One of my other students whose parent did earn a degree is in the Northwest Detention Center while she's here. Right, that's her reality, right? So while that technically doesn't fall under the first gen label, it's still about the vulnerability of our students as well as their tremendous assets and resiliency in order to occupy and be in this space, right? So beyond students, we have to have more of these conversations with staff and faculty and then start to evaluate practice and policy, right?
I wonder if people and faculty and staff would maybe be willing to participate in a self, you choose your participation of identifying, because I think that as I have the honor of getting to speak with a lot of high school level folks, and when I share our first gen numbers with them, they're just like, they get so excited, they're so inspired by our school, and I think it would be so special to have similar information about our faculty and staff. And
Right.
so I don't know, I mean, obviously choosing
so-
participation, but gosh, that would be
Yeah,
so
so this is my hope, that with the pilot project, while it was short and it was a very specific outcome, that after this year we could expand and build on this idea and then start to, again, integrate it into our work across, right, all levels. And you're right, I mean, when staff and faculty, and we secretly make the eye contact, right, and all of a sudden it's like, you're first gen too, right, and then it just sort of floodgates, right, all these sort of stories come forward. It's really empowering, so, yeah. Yes, sir.
I was intrigued, well, I'm not sure if that's the right word, but over the past week, we had a lot of national attention on our writing center, and there was a lot of commentary in the messages that people sent that speaks to some of these issues directly. One of the things I noticed was this, you had a comment about grit on there, and there are a lot of comments about, if people are thinking they need to be treated, especially, they just need to buckle down and work.
It's a reiteration of the bootstraps narrative, right? If you just work hard enough and pull yourself up.
We, in our storytelling, if we learn that somebody is first generation, we try to bring that out and mention that in a profile if they are open to us doing that.
Right.
At the same time, I'm completely aware that some people might think that we're tokenized. And so, I want to try, that's a really difficult thing to navigate.
That's right.
I need guidance.
Turn the
and I
cameras
don't
off,
know.
lock the doors, let's go, right? Let's order some pizza and have a big conversation. This is a great question and a great, I think, place to start the conversation, right? The politics of naming ourselves as first gen, the national narrative around the TLC, right? If you go and look at the 6 traits and the definition of linguistic asset, this is what Asao is talking about, right? But how to do this work without tokenizing or co-opting, right? Those identities and those stories.
So
Certainly, there's plenty of people that need
Yeah.
to hear those messages.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have to stop.
we do. But just for the moment,
Yeah.
right? So I don't want us to stop. I want us to hit pause, remember this, and talk about it
Yeah.
more because it is a really critical conversation.
Right. And I'll just say one thing. Shout out to Megan and John because the Media Center did a beautiful job with their posters. I don't know if you've seen them around campus. They're gorgeous. They're fantastic. So thank you.
Thank you,
Yep.
Tanya.